guys, it is Sarah here with my service dog Bailey, and today's video is actually all about Bailey. So I'm going to be talking about how I got Bailey and how I ended up training her to be my service dog. Sarah here with my service dog. Hi. Good girl. So before I got Bailey, I actually was researching service dogs for about a year. Originally, I looked at ESAs, and then it became more and more clear that I really needed a service dog with task work to help me with my disability. So I started researching what kind of tasks I would need and what kind of temperament things to look for and what breed of dog and what size of dog and all that stuff. And I also did a bunch of research to help convince my doctor and my mom to kind of get on board with the idea. So I needed a doctor's note because I needed to be able to fly to and from school with the dog, and I also needed to have documentation to have the dog living in the dorms with me. So I, presented information to my doctor about how I thought it would be helpful and how it would help me and what tasks the dog would do. And thankfully, my doctor got on board pretty quickly. My mom was harder to convince. She needed to be okay with me bringing the dog back home for breaks and things like that. So she needed to be okay with housing the dog. And I was going to pay for everything, and that was kind of decided very early on. My mom wasn't going to financially help me with getting a service dog, but she did need to be okay with having one in her house. So it took longer to convince my mom, and I don't think she was truly convinced in her heart until she saw how much Bailey helped me. But I got her convinced enough to where she agreed for me to get a service dog, and she agreed that she would be okay with it being in her house during summer and winter break and things like that. So once I got my mom on board, we started looking for dogs, and I knew I couldn't handle a puppy due to my dorm situation and just how much my disability was affecting me at the time. There was no way I could handle a puppy. That would just be too much for me, and in the dorm environment it just wouldn't work. So we were looking into older dogs. So we started looking into shelters first because it's easier to find older dogs there. And also I didn't really have funds for a breeder dog. I had funds to adopt a dog. So there was one dog that we actually went through and did an interview and put in our application to adopt. But for a bunch of reasons, unfortunately we weren't able to adopt him, which probably was better in the end because Bailey is just such a good match for me. But after that experience, we tried to go to the shelter again, and then I really just had some not great experiences with the staff and how they responded to me saying that my intention was not only to bring the dog to a dorm, but my intention was to train the dog to do service work. And rightfully so, a lot of shelter dogs really aren't suited for service work, and I didn't bring a trainer with me to check out these dogs, and I didn't have a behaviorist looking at them. So the shelter staff really were trying to set the dogs up for the best success they could, and given that shelter dogs have a lot of baggage with them, there was a lot of resistance to me bringing a dog into a dorm or saying I wanted a dog to train for service work out of these dogs that potentially have baggage that would need to be dealt with. So I got really discouraged with shelters and ended up looking on things like Pet Finder or Craigslist online. And I sent in inquiries about different dogs, asking to meet them. And one of the families that we sent an inquiry to was on Craigslist. And they were looking to rehome their lab healer mix. And she was about a year and a half. And I saw the picture and I looked at the description of Bailey and I was just like, wow, this looks like a pretty good dog. It already has, basic house manners, and she seems really sweet. Let's go and meet her. And so the first time I met Bailey, I asked the owners to bring her to a dog park because I wanted to see how she reacted around other dogs. So we met up at a dog park and I watched her. Her previous owners didn't use a leash at all. She just kind of stayed within a reasonable distance of them whenever they went on walks. And she definitely knew she needed to be close. They didn't train her that way. She was just that way, naturally. And so I saw her get out of the car with them off leash, pretty calmly, went up to the entrance of the dog park and then went in and just like walked around and sniffed around and didn't really have any negative interactions with other dogs. Something else that I found was important is when Bailey's owners called her towards them, even when Bailey was in the middle of like sniffing at something, she came directly to them. And that kind of like attention was really something that caught my eye. And so after that, my mom and I went home, and then I messaged the owner again and I asked, I would like to take Bailey for a walk. I would like to see how she responds on a leash and things like that. I went to their house, got Bailey. They had a leash that they had never used. So I walked her on a leash, and initially she was, acting like a dog who had never walked on a leash. Within about half an hour of that first time walking her, I had gotten her to, loose leash walk and to sit and down and really pay attention to me in front of like distractions like cars and kids and stuff, without any treats. I didn't bring any treats with me, and so I just kind of wanted to see how she would respond to me asking her to do things. And because she responded so well and she seemed to have learned so quickly, I took her back and I was like, okay, I'd like to try again like in a week and take her for a walk again. And after that next time, it was also clear that Bailey was picking up on what I was telling her to do. The second time I took her for a walk, I brought treats, and I tried to see what I could get her to do. So I got her to spin and roll over and do, these really basic things. But she was able to do all of those in one short training session. And her previous owners really didn't do anything other than making her sit when she wanted food. So it really showed that she was picking up on these behaviors that she hadn't ever been asked to do before very quickly. And I, kind of being an amateur, saw that she was very trainable and she had a good personality, a pretty good temperament as far as I could tell, and was willing to work with me. And so after that, I worked with her owner and they rehomed her to me. I paid a rehoming fee, and she lived with me in my hometown for the rest of the summer, and then we went to college together. Now, for other people, I wouldn't really suggest going down that same path. It worked out for me because I think it was very lucky. Bailey was a very lucky find, and she's like a unicorn. But in the future, I know when I have her successor, I'm going to have a trained veterinary behaviorist evaluate the dogs. And I know I'm going to go with a breeder in the future because I will have resources to handle that. And I'm going to not only have a behaviorist take a look at the dog, but also have a trainer take a look at the dog and see what the trainer's evaluation is as well. And so while it worked out for me this time, as I've learned in my service dog journey, I know I would never do it the same way again. So if you are considering getting your service dog off of Craigslist, I would still suggest that you have a behaviorist help you. And even if that means you meet the dog first and you get a general personality gauge and then you get the behaviorist, because I know those can be expensive, then I would suggest that. But after we got Bailey, I immediately started training her for task work. Because of how my disability had progressed, the most important thing for her to learn was in-home task work immediately. And even if she had never been able to progress to public access work, her doing in-home work still would have been extremely helpful to me. And so we focused on task work first and letting her be a dog whenever we were out of the house. And then after she had been with me for about a year, we worked with a separate trainer for all of her public access work. So we sent her on a board and train, and then we did, continuing training, continuing communication based on those skills she learned in order to get her up to public access readiness. So a lot of people do it in an opposite way. A lot of people train public access before they train task work. But just because of my circumstances at the time, I ended up training task work first. I think for my future dogs, they will likely be trained in obedience and public access stuff a little bit earlier than task work, but I'll probably train them around the same time, like simultaneously. Training Bailey to be a full service dog was more work and more time than I originally expected. I knew it typically takes about 2 years to train a dog to be a service dog, and I understood that, but the amount of time commitment, I think, wasn't super clear to me until I started training her. I'm thankful that her task work really clicked with her very quickly. She knew what she was supposed to do and she loved to do it. But her public access work was something that I would not have been able to train without a trainer. I was able to do basically all of her task work on my own using YouTube videos and things online and what I had learned about training, because she was so smart and so intuitive and picked up on the task work so quickly. With the public access work, because she was 1.5 years when I got her and she hadn't been through formal training before that, there were bad habits that we had to solve, and we really had to be super consistent so that she knew this was a new standard of behavior that she was being held to. So that's definitely an advantage of starting with a puppy or, having a younger dog, because starting with a dog that already has some sort of bad habit or it has been living a significant portion of their life without strict rules, when you put in those strict rules, it changes things up for them and it takes them a bit to get used to. Training while I was going to classes and things and dealing with a lot of hard things with my disability was also difficult for me. And without the help of a trainer and friends who were very understanding, I don't think I would have really gotten through it. I was also really thankful that Bailey was such a good fit for me. And because she was such a good fit, she wanted to work for me. She wanted to be my dog. It kind of made things a little easier. So that is the very, very basic version of how I ended up getting Bailey to be my service dog. If there's any parts of the story that you guys want more details on, or you want to hear about different things, please let me know in the comments down below. I always love answering your questions and hearing your thoughts. And I would love to hear, if you have a service dog or service dog in training, how you ended up getting that service dog, because everyone's journey is different. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye. Bailey, say goodbye. Oh, say goodbye. Oh, is that a kiss?